And thank you so much for watching Morning Live. Now, yesterday, the Constitutional Court dismissed the application to delay the elections, and this was requested in order to allow a decision to be made as to whether to allow individuals to stand as independent candidates in national or provincial elections. The New Nation Movement and Indigenous First Nation Advocacy South Africa, alongside the Princess Chantal Revelle Trust, who brought the application to court, will have to wait until August for their initial case to be heard. And joining us now is Anthony Phillip Williams, Chairperson of the Indigenous First Nation Advocacy South Africa, to discuss this outcome. Thanks so much for coming through.
Thank you for having us.
So first and foremost, were you surprised at the outcome?
No, we weren't surprised that the court was going to rule against us, because we thought it was a big step. And there was a lot of technicalities and technical issues that the court was considering. Sitting there in the court myself, we also realized that some of the issues around if we suspend the elections, who's going to do the amendments. I think that was a big one, because Parliament effectively have been suspended. So these were some of the things that we also were very clear on, that we were not surprised that they would postpone it. In fact, the postponement for us was really a massive plus factor, and even the outcome. The fact that they heard us in court, we think that was for us a major step in the right direction, because the current situation in the country is untenable.
Just remind us again, why is it that you want individuals to be able to stand for national and provincial elections?
We think that the Constitution is absolutely clear, in particular Section 19, subsection 3B, where it speaks about the right as an individual to stand. So we think that for a long time that this right has been violated in South Africa, and the reason why we think it's important for independent candidates to stand is because I mean we listen to all the different media platforms. There's a very clear sense from many people in South Africa that they are going to stay this one out. They are not going to vote, or they're going to spoil it, because they don't think that their voices are well represented, and therefore we think that we need a new electoral system that will accommodate those, particularly those dissenting voices, and those voices who are unhappy currently with the current situation.
So as per, and I would imagine you've done some research in this regard, why do you think, what is it about the current electoral system and the Electoral Act that actually hinders this process from taking place?
Well, not only is the Electoral Act unconstitutional, and this is going to be tested when we go back into court on the 15th of August of this year, but the fact that many people, in particular the First Nation people, has felt very clear that their voice has been marginalized, has been suppressed since democracy. Yes, people talk about free and fair elections. We spoke to the IEC. They had the Indigenous people in Uppington not so long ago, and we were very clear with the IEC that we think that they might rave about an election that's going to be free, but we don't think it is fair. And it's not fair because the voices of First Nation people, in particular in this country, has not been heard, has been suppressed, has been put on the margins, and so therefore we think that it was important for us to go with the New Nation movement in this regard, so that we can finally, give South Africans, the ordinary South Africans, a real voice, and let them, be represented, their voices be represented adequately within government. What happens, you currently have is a situation that you can only get into Parliament, or your voice is only heard through a political system. And we think that the political party system is flawed, because if you are not in good books, or if you are in good books with the top brass, then you get in, and there's no particular representation for constituencies. So people out somewhere in Khayelitsha might not have someone that represent their voice coming from Khayelitsha, coming from Kokstad in KZN, or coming from El Rado Mado Park, somewhere, those voices are not heard. And so we think that the independent voice, in particular constituency base, is going to give us a better mileage and a better voice.
Whilst I hear your assertion about the unconstitutionality of the Electoral Act, if we are being absolutely clear about it, there's nothing that actually precludes individuals from contesting the election, because you could, as an individual, and I heard you talk about the party system and representation to the National Assembly, etc., but there's nothing that precludes you as an individual from then starting a party, so to speak, and then contesting the elections, even under the current system. Yeah, but you see, if that was entirely pure and clean, we wouldn't have had the Van Zyl Slabbert report. It was very clear that the way we are running the government and the way the system works is prejudiced towards particular those small voices. Because remember, we're talking about numbers. This is really what this is about. Yes, I could personally, in my personal capacity, start a party, but it's about numbers. And unfortunately, in South Africa, politics is still about race. It's race-based, and so the majority wins. And this is the thing that we think that we need to address. But how is that going to change if you have individuals contesting? When individual contest, and particular, remember what we're talking about. We're specifically talking about a constituency-based approach, where we think that the constituency, a particular constituency, will be better represented and will also be able to recall an individual who represents them if this particular individual does not, adhere to the needs and the cry and the mandate of the people. So that we think is very, very, very going to be very different. How realistic is that, though? Have you thought about it? So if you're saying that we need to change that system, what sort of system would you like to see? How would it work? What would it look like? What are the numbers? Well, I think I still think that what Van Zyl Slabbert came up with is an attainable system where people in the different we particularly looking across the 52 districts in the country, and we think that is a much more representative approach, where you have a district representing you almost at national, which means you almost take away what is a provincial setting, because we think that this massive hierarchical structure, we think that something is going missing there, in particular in that middle space there at the provincial level. We think that from a district to a national, people are better represented, and that's what we would advocate for. But in terms of representation, how is that going to change the real issues at grassroots level? How is that going to change the issue of accountability, of representativity, and that people would be satisfied to that degree? How is this going to change that? Because you are directly responsible to your constituency. Your constituency now has the ability to remove you or to recall you. And therefore, accountability becomes, number one, and also transparency. So we will be able to know exactly when you go off the line, when you veer off the line. What we currently have, you sit there for 5 years, and then what do we have later on? We have all of this massive inequality that just persists. But what are the current remedies in that regard? The current remedies we don't have any in the current system. There's no remedies. I mean, it's just relentlessly people are just tossed into an abyss where there's no return for them from this massive big black hole. And we need to rescue this, and we need to collectively. We don't think that we have all the answers. We think that it's important that South Africans need to come together, and we need to discuss. What particular system we are looking for that will adequately represent and keep people accountable. That's what we're looking for. We unfortunately have to leave it there. Thanks to Anthony Phillip Williams, Chairperson for the Indigenous First Nation Advocacy South Africa, talking to us about their next step following the Constitutional Court's decision yesterday not to delay the upcoming elections in order to allow time to make a decision of whether independent candidates should be allowed to stand. And that matter will resume in August. So we'll wait to see what happens and also what they do in the meantime. Right.